In today's video, we address the challenging question of what is design. Hello everyone, my name is Simon and I'm a designer, design professor, and design theorist. And on this channel, I'm taking a holistic view at the world of design, from its theory to its lifestyle. As I just mentioned, today we're looking at the question of what is design. And I don't mean from a technical standpoint, like what do I do as a designer at the office, or how do I manage my everyday tools to design, but rather, what is the essential concept of design? What are we supposed to be doing exactly here? Making things prettier? How are we supposed to be approaching this? By arbitrary methods? These types of questions sent me on a quest to find the perfect definition of design. In this journey, I have encountered and collected different definitions and ideas that have been put forward as answers to this question. But every single one of these always ended up feeling a little bit incomplete, short, even though they were highly enlightening. They just always felt as if they were a piece of the puzzle instead of the greater puzzle. So I set out to form my own understanding, my own holistic definition of design, and that is what I'm going to be sharing with you all today. The first challenge that I encountered was a technical one. In English, the word design is both a noun and a verb, which makes it a bit confusing at times when thinking about it. But I did find that this duality is a good reflection of the concept itself. And this is how I have structured my definition, through these two distinct but related lenses. And by putting together these two points of views, we will get a holistic definition of design, a clearer view of the puzzle instead of just a piece. This will be a two-part video series, with today's video focusing on the noun definition. Now, with the stage set, let's dive into it. My definition is design is the result of the effort to create a specific and optimal human experience. Now, this might not seem like much, but we actually have a lot to unfold from this sentence. What we're going to do is to look at each component of the definition in isolation to be able to understand what each one of them brings to the table. These are going to be effort to create, specific and optimal, and human experience. Let us start with the human experience component. Even though it might not seem obvious, it is important to identify that we design for ourselves, humans. This states a clear categorical distinction between us and everything else in the universe, meaning objects or other creatures. But you might ask yourself, don't we design for animals? What about zoos or birdhouses? There are two issues with this perception. First, if you think about it, the majority of the designs for animals are primarily to harbor the human experience of relating to those animals. Zoos have gates to control animals, not because the animal itself wants to be in that structure, but because humans want that animal to be there. The other issue is not that we can't physically make something for animals, like we do birdhouses. The challenge is, how do we know that we are designing well if we can't communicate with that animal to see if the design is good? We can't depend on the animal using whatever it is that we made for it as a measure of good design. At best, it just demonstrates that what we made is good enough, or it's actually the only option for it at the moment. Ultimately, we can never truly know what the optimal experience looks like for an animal interacting with a specific man-made object. Take, for example, us, humans. We're still in our journey of designing everything. We criticize designs that we have right now, and that critique comes forth in spite of the collective human effort across time and space to work on and generate that particular design as best as we can. We can only ultimately design for the human experience because that is what we can feel, explore, and communicate. This component of the human experience also considers what exactly is within the reach of the domain of design, which is everything that the human experience encompasses. This means anything that humans can do, from a pen to write, to a car to move, to a building to dwell in, and everything in between. And it also reflects on the scale of what can be designed, from a microchip to a space station, as they do ultimately form part of the human experience as a whole. Now, with our wider understanding of what this component of the human experience means for this definition, let's take another look at it. Design is the result of the effort to create a specific and optimal human experience. Now, let's move on to the second component of the definition, effort to create. There are 3 points I want to discuss here. First is that design is an artificial process. We make things that do not happen without the human effort, both intellectually and physically, to bring natural components into an artificial construct that will help us achieve a particular goal in a more efficient manner. This idea helps us to categorize and differentiate design as an artificial activity that does not exist in what we consider the natural state of the world. Now, you might be thinking about, what about birds that construct nests or beavers and their dams? Aren't they also living above the natural state? Well, this upcoming point helps us to explore this question in a little bit more depth. Design is part of the human instinct. It is ridiculous to even consider that humans are not exceptionally creative and that we don't have the capacity to live above the natural state of the world. But this point also reflects on a fundamental cognitive capacity that humans have, asking the question, why? It may seem simplistic, but if you think about it, all other types of questions, the how, what, when, and where, are needed to operate a set of variables. And a machine or animal can arguably operate these parameters to successfully navigate reality. But the ability to put forward and contemplate the question of why, as we humans can, is what generates new directions and throws out any notion of determinism. We're able to challenge the current state of reality. I like to refer to this idea as the why postulate, since I find it so fundamental to understand design and human nature. As designers, we're constantly challenging the natural world and asking, why can it not be done differently, better? But why make it better? Someone can say, because there's some better technology or more advanced knowledge available and we can reinvent, so we should. But why reinvent? And arguably the unending chain of questioning would go on. The bottom line is that there is an instinct in us humans to always look for the better solution, and thus the fundamental unique journey of design for humans. This also helps us to differentiate us from the other creatures that also build. These birds and beavers are not reinventing their nests and dams because they can't. They don't hold the cognitive capacities to be able to do so like we can. Thirdly, design is a never-ending process as I just depicted. Thus, the effort to create isn't the definition, alluding to this continuous process as a fundamental component of design rather than achieving the final perfect iteration of it. Let's take another look at the definition now that I have explained what the effort to create entails. Design is the result of the effort to create a specific and optimal human experience. With this, we have arrived at the third and final component of our definition, specific and optimal. I'm grouping these two words together as they fundamentally relate to each other in this context. To be able to do design, we need to specify what we're going to do and how. To be able to guide all of our efforts into finding that optimal way of doing that thing. The more problems we're trying to solve with our design, the more complex the solution is going to end up being, and by definition, the less optimal. We can think of this in a spectrum. The simpler the problem to be solved, the simpler the resulting design, and vice versa. Take the Swiss knife, for example. It does a lot of things, but it does none well. The Swiss knife exchanges depth of experience for width of solution. The Swiss knife is not the optimal way of using any of the tools it provides, but it might be the best solution to provide all those tools in a pocket-sized manner. Now, for something to be optimal, it's not just about specificity of the problem and simplicity of the design. It is also about the experience of relating to that design. And this is where the concept of form versus function is really helpful. A bit of background on this very important design concept. The first iteration of this idea was form follows function, And it came about as a response to the over-ornamentation happening in the Renaissance and Baroque in the architecture field, where modernist architects like Le Corbusier, designer of Villa Savoye, and Mies van der Rohe, designer of the Barcelona Pavilion, were saying that the form, meaning the beauty of the design, needs to come from its function being reflected, and not from superfluous, unnecessary ornamentation added to it. Then, a response to this thought arose from architect Frank Lloyd Wright, designer of Fallingwater, saying it is both form and function, meaning that both the beauty and the usefulness of the design are as equally important. Let's look at your classic hospital design. This is a life-saving design. The way rooms need to be laid out and related, distant travel paths calculated, equipment infrastructure coordinated. Amongst many more variables, it's all geared for maximum efficiency for the staff to operate in the space to save lives. But hospitals lean towards the form follows function premise, and even though they might be very efficient, no one wants to be in one. And as it is well documented, there are a lot of efforts from environmental psychologists to make these type of spaces beautiful, appealing to the patients, as that in turn has a demonstrated effect in the healing process. The form, the beauty of the design, is as important as its function, its usefulness, which is what Wright identified. But isn't beauty subjective? Isn't it in the eye of the beholder? How can we say that blue is better than red? Even though beauty cannot be quantified in the same way as functionality, we can still quantify it. For example, the golden section or the Fibonacci sequence, we fundamentally and inexplicably find attractive. It doesn't matter its iteration. It could be geometry, sound, or patterns. And we can quantify this. That is what the golden section is. It's a mathematical documentation of this structure. And we humans find it beautiful. And we can tell that humans as a whole, not an absolute, but as a species, we do have recognizable aesthetical leanings. We see it documented and quantified in product sales. Now, if we take out the cynical but influential marketing forces, we can start forming a clear idea of what humans find beautiful in design. From fashion to devices, from architecture to transportation. Now, when something is functional more than beautiful, like the hospital, we use it, but there is friction in its use, and a detrimental experience emerges from it. When something is beautiful but not functional, it does captivate our visceral selves, but we end up losing interest in it in the short term. It is when these two aspects are elevated together that we have an optimal design, where humans are captivated by its form and function, and a long-lasting, pleasant, and useful relation with the design is generated. This idea of this perfect duality is taken further by Don Norman, design researcher and author, when he expresses that form is function. And other designers share this idea, like Kelly Johnson, the designer of the SR-71 Blackbird, when he says an airplane that is beautiful will fly the same way. Is it because humans are made to identify what is beautiful as a measure of what is functional? Think about it. We find the golden section in nature, in plants, seashell, and many more organisms. And we presuppose that the particular design of that organism is the optimal iteration of its species for its survival in that environment. Is that why we find the Blackbird design so captivating? A design that holds all of the records for its type of engine. Is that why all phone designs have basically collapsed into the same one? Are we able to identify performance through aesthetics? This view correlates with beauty expressing truth, like Plato and Socrates explored, or when a scientist and mathematicians find an equation that reflects reality as beautiful. In this way, it does make sense that aesthetics is a reflection or even a measure of truth of what is optimal in a design. And this balance of form and function is what we identify as a good design, an optimal design. I could go more in depth on each one of these categories and components, and I could literally make entire videos for each one of these topics alone, and I probably will. but I think that I have presented today is enough to communicate the basic notions that compose this definition. So let's recap. Design is the result of the effort to create a specific and optimal human experience. We create as an innate human instinct, which we're able to do because we are creative and are able to ask the question why. Creating is an artificial process. It is changing the natural state of the world to go beyond it as a never ending human endeavor. Design is specific. By understanding the relationship between breadth of solution versus depth of experience, we can better visualize why addressing a specific design challenge will permit us to generate a better design experience, and vice versa, like the Swiss knife. And we took a look at what optimal means, the perfect relationship between beauty and function. And lastly, the human experience, noting that we can design for the entire human experience and only truly design for human needs. Now, by no means do I think this definition is the final and absolute iteration of what design is, but I do find it extremely clarifying and helpful to better understand this fundamental complex concept from a holistic standpoint. My hope today is that it has also helped you to understand design a little bit better. I did mention at the start of the video that this will be a two-part video series. This video in particular was focusing on what is design from the noun perspective, the idea. Well, in the next video, we will explore how humans design from the verb perspective. And this will help us to develop our holistic understanding of what is design. And with that said, we have arrived at the end of the video. I would love to hear your thoughts about this definition or your own insights of design in the section comment below. If you're new to the channel, check out my previous video talking about what this channel is all about. The link is going to be floating somewhere on the screen. And if you like the video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell icon, and most importantly, share the video link with someone you think might find this video interesting. I'm building up the channel, so any help on your part is a massive contribution towards this effort. I'll see you in the next video.